Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the words of the Buddha. We're in volume 12, chapters 11 through 20. Today we're going to be studying those through having a student in Zoom to be able to read the chapter. Then afterwards, I'm going to share some teachings on that, and then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you guys might have related to that chapter. This is how we do the Pali Canon and English study group, so I'd like to welcome all of you guys, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly, and at the same time invite anybody who's in Zoom to be able to volunteer to read this first chapter. If you'd like to raise your hand electronically, that would be helpful. And then when we get to the question period, if there's anybody who's in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, if you guys would like to ask questions, you can put that either in the comment section or you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like. Looks like Pat's volunteering to read this first one. So if you'd like to go ahead, sir, we'll go ahead and get started.
Chapter 11. The perfectly enlightened one prohibits monks from boasting about a non-existence of state of further men in oneself. Whatever monk should speak of a condition of further men, attainment of jhanas or stage of enlightenment, to one who is not ordained, if it is a fact, there is an offense of wrongdoing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. So here, this is the Buddha talking about ensuring that one isn't being arrogant or boastful, having conceit. Because if an individual went around and was bragging about any kind of attainments that they might have experienced, whether it be one of the jhanas or one of the four stages of enlightenment, there would be arrogance and conceit there. And that's not what one is interested in having. As part of getting to enlightenment, you would need to eliminate your conceit. This is part of what we refer to as the ego. So he's giving guidance here to be able to help individuals to be able to understand this cause and effect or action and result, the natural law of dhamma. Because if we ended up going out into the world with conceit, people would experience that and they wouldn't be interested in being around it, and we would experience people just pushing us away. This is what happens when people tend to be around ego, is they tend to be disinterested in not hanging out with that person or spending time with that person, and you'll find that people will push you aside. So the Buddha helping you to be able to see this natural law of dhamma, which is what all of his teachings are all about. Here, this is a teaching where he's helping his ordained practitioners to realize that it's unwise to share what your attainments are. And he's saying this to his ordained practitioners, that it would be unwise for them to share their attainments with somebody who's not ordained. The reason why is because within the ordained community, they will sometimes talk with each other about where they are on their journey to enlightenment, because they're actually helping each other to understand the path to enlightenment and progress on the path to enlightenment. So it's kind of like what I share with household practitioners, that if you went out and you shared with just the average person what your attainments are, this would be unwise because there's conceit there. But if you were to talk with your teacher, for example, and you were interested in growing and developing to attain enlightenment, and you were discussing with your teacher about where you thought you were in your journey to enlightenment, and your interest in sharing this with your teacher is to be able to help determine whether you are indeed in that jhana or in that stage of enlightenment, your intention there is to cultivate wisdom and get help from a teacher, versus just going out and just kind of, being boastful or arrogant with people and bragging about what you think you've attained or what you haven't attained. It would be unwise to go out into the world and do that. And here you can see the Buddha talking about that here, because as one experiences more and more improvement to the condition of their mind, it's not uncommon for there to be conceit to arise, because you'll notice that your mind's becoming more concentrated, more focused, having clarity and deep memory. You'll have wisdom about things that other people in the world don't have wisdom about, and it's possible for the conceit to arise. And what you would like to do is restrain the mind, not allow the mind to do that. And this is just one aspect of that, is not going around and telling people what you think you've attained or what you haven't attained. But if you were to talk with the teacher in order to get help and guidance, the intention here is different. It's to be able to cultivate wisdom, and you can see that there's no conceit there, because the ultimate goal is to cultivate wisdom, not to boast or be arrogant. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom electronically and ask any and all questions that you like. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So I'm going to move to this next chapter, chapter 12. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Samantha, go ahead, ma'am.
Do not be judgmental regarding people. The perfectly enlightened one said to the Venerable Ananda, by reason of the female household practitioner Meghasala states disagreement to the fortunate one that her father Purana was celibate, living apart, abstaining from sexual intercourse, but her paternal uncle Isiddhata was not celibate, not abstaining from sexual intercourse, but lived in a contented married life. When they died, the fortunate one also declared, they attained to the state of a once returner and have been reborn in the Tusita group of heavenly beings. Judgmental people compare them, saying, this one has just the same qualities as the other, so why is one worse and one better? This will be for their lasting harm and suffering. In this case, the person who is sweet-natured and has listened, learned, comprehended theoretically, and found temporary freedom is better and finer than the other person. Why is that? Because the teaching stream carries him along, but who can know this difference except the Tathagata? Therefore, Ananda, do not be judgmental regarding people. Do not pass judgment on people. Those who pass judgment on people harm themselves. I alone, or one like me, may pass judgment on people.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So let's talk for a moment before we describe this particular chapter about what is judgment and what is discernment. Because one is something that you're looking to eliminate, and the other one is something that you're looking to cultivate. Judgment is where you're looking at an individual and trying to decide what is wholesome or unwholesome for them. The mind might even be looking down on this person, thinking that you're better than them and putting yourself above them. Or also, if someone puts themselves above others, they tend to put themselves below others too. This is part of the conceit. That's why these chapters are showing up together, because it's all about helping you to eliminate conceit. Because when there's conceit in the mind will be judgmental. And this is something that you need to eliminate, where you're putting yourself above or below other people, because it's detrimental to the mind and it's only harming your own mind. Because when you're judging people, you're looking down on them, or you're putting yourself under people and you're looking up to them in such awe that you're shaken up and calm around them. It's actually harming your own mind, because you can't see this individual as they truly are and just love all beings. That's ultimately what you're interested in doing, is getting to the point where you can just love all beings, that you're not judging them as good or bad or right or wrong, that you just understand that everybody has different decisions and they make different decisions. They have different thoughts and experiences in the world, and they're going to make different decisions. And then instead of judging them and looking down on them or looking up to them with such awe, you can instead just have discernment. What discernment is where you have wise decision making. Everything that you do in life needs to be based in discernment or wise decision making. When you have discernment, you're making wise decisions, and it's going to produce wholesome dhamma or wholesome results for you. But when you make unwise decisions, now you're going to experience unwholesome dhamma or unwholesome results. So what the Buddha is talking about here is that there was an individual who was asking him a question where their father was celibate, meaning they weren't having sex. They were abstaining from sexual intercourse. And then their father's brother, so their paternal uncle, was having sex. They were actually involved in sexual intercourse. And when these two individuals died, the Buddha was essentially helping people to understand that, hey, these people both got to the second stage of enlightenment, and they're both were reborn into this particular area of the heavenly realm. And this particular area of the heavenly realm is kind of like a holding place before one gets actually reborn, because as you know, as a once returner, you're ultimately going to come back into the world, into the human realm again. But this Tasutta group of heavenly beings is kind of like a holding place before beings actually come into the human realm. And the Buddha is saying that these two individuals essentially experience the exact same thing upon death. But there were other people who weren't seeing it that way, that they were looking at this person and looking at all the different aspects of their life and trying to judge where they might have been reborn, or whether they were good or bad or wholesome or unwholesome. And ultimately what the Buddha is sharing here is that it causes your own harm and suffering by choosing to do that, that it's unwise for you to be able to look at other people and judge them as being good or bad or any other type of qualities like that. You can instead just have discernment, where if there's somebody, say, that you're spending time with as a friend or a family member, and you notice that they're making unwise decisions, and you're choosing to not associate with that individual, you can just choose not to spend time with that person without thinking of them as being good or bad or right or wrong or anything like that. You can just make a wise decision based on your decision making rather than judging this person as being good or bad. And this is going to protect your mind, where you can still love this person. You can still have a genuine interest in seeing them be well, but you're just choosing based in discernment to not spend time with this person, for example, right? This is just one example. So ultimately, the Buddha is saying to his student Ananda that it would be unwise to be judgmental towards individuals, not to pass judgment on others and trying to determine whether they're good or bad or right or wrong or things of that nature. And then he ultimately says that he or one like him can pass judgment. What he's meaning here is it's him or one like him, meaning a Buddha, that is able to determine where somebody is going to potentially be reborn in their next life. And there's no other purpose for anybody else to be able to determine that, because if a regular average practitioner was to look at another person and try to figure this out, they're going to have to be judgmental and try to figure out all of these things, where a Buddha would just know the answer to this question, and they would only be sharing it in order to help people to learn and understand the path to enlightenment and how rebirth is occurring. Where this other person who's talking about this is doing so in a judgmental way. And the Buddha is saying it's unwise for that to occur, and it's only going to harm your own mind if you allow your mind to be judgmental. So you would like to eliminate any kind of judgment and move to discernment, where you're making decisions based in wisdom that are going to lead to wholesome results in your day-to-day life, and not looking down on someone. Because if you look down on people, you're also going to sometimes look up to people, and your mind's going to be shaken up or uncalm. Like maybe you go into your boss's office, or maybe a famous celebrity or politician or something like this. You might be shaken up when you're around this type of person. Your mind's unstable and unsteady, and you would like to get to the point where your mind's unshakable, that it's stable and steady at all times. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Leo might have a question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, David. I would like to ask something about the chapter before, if it's okay.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I just bumped into this Zoom meeting, and don't know what it was exactly about, but I think you mentioned that people who have ego, other people don't like. I'm not interested in hanging out with this type of person. What about a person who has ego? Does he prefer to hang out with other people with ego? It seems like I know some communities in Germany, they tend to have more ego, and I think these type of people like to hang out with each other. And is it that they enjoy it more to hang out with other people who also have ego, and they avoid people who have less ego, more humble and so on? Or yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's not one way or the other in that kind of situation. There can be people that have a high degree of ego who enjoy hanging out with other people that have ego, but also a person with a lot of ego can also clash with someone who has a lot of ego, and now they're not interested in spending time with people who do have ego. So it can happen one way or the other. And, it's not always one particular way that somebody who has ego, people will push that person aside, because there's some people who enjoy that. They're not even understanding the harm in that. But in terms of wholesome people, in terms of people who understand wisdom and the types of individuals that you would be interested in spending time with, they're not going to be interested in being around someone who has a very high, extensive amount of ego. So it can be one way or the other. But people who are wise and who understand the path to enlightenment and understand what's producing wholesome results for you, they're going to be disinterested in hanging out with someone who has this high degree of ego.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yep, you're welcome. Let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. Don't see any questions. So let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 13. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay. Looks like Samantha, and then we'll go to Pat for the next one after that.
The 5 Great Thieves. Monks, there are these 5 great thieves to be found in the world. What are the 5? 1. Monks, here a certain one of the great thieves thought, to be sure, will I, surrounded by 100 or by 1,000, wander among villages, towns, and the possessions of kings, slaying and causing to be slain, destroying and causing destruction, tormenting and causing torment. He, in the course of time, surrounded by 100 or by 1,000, wanders among villages, towns, and the possession of kings, slaying and causing to be slain, destroying and causing destruction, tormenting and causing torment. Now indeed, monks, a certain unwholesome monk thought, to be sure, I, surrounded by 100 or by 1,000, will make an alms tour among villages, towns, and the possession of kings, honored, respected, appreciated, worshipped, admired, supported by householders, by those who have gone forth into homelessness, and by the requisites of robes, alms food, bedding, and medicine. He, in the course of time, surrounded by 100, by 1,000, made an alms tour among villages, towns, and the possession of kings, honored, respected, appreciated, worshipped, admired, supported by householders, and receiving the requisites of robes, alms food, bedding, and medicine for those who go forth into homelessness. This, monks, is the first great thief found existing in the world. 2. Again, monks, here a certain unwholesome monk, having mastered thoroughly teachings and the discipline made known by the Tathagata, takes it for his own. This, monks, is the second great thief found existing in the world. 3. Again, monks, here a certain unwholesome monk blames a follower of the pure Brahma life, one leading the absolute pure Brahma life, for an unfounded breach of the Brahma life. This, monks, is the third great thief found existing in the world. 4. Again, monks, a certain unwholesome monk favors and persuades a householder on account of those things which are important possessions of the community, on account of those things which are its important requisites, that is to say, a park, a site for a park, a vihara, monastery, a site for a vihara, a couch, a chair, a bolster, a pillow, a brass vessel, a brass jar, a brass pot, a brass receptacle, a razor, an axe, a hatchet, a hoe, a spade, a creeper, bamboo, munja grass, babaja grass, tina grass, clay, wooden articles, earthenware articles. This, monk, is the fourth great thief found existing in the world. 5. In the world with the heavenly beings, and including Mara, including the Brahma world, including ascetics and Brahmins, including breathing things, including heavenly beings and men, this is the chief great thief. He who claims a non-existent state of furtherment, enlightenment, which has not been attained. What is the reason for this? Monks, you have eaten the country's alms food by theft.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So the Buddha is talking about these 5 situations where one could be considered a thief, because typically we think about a thief as someone who's stealing something and taking something. So the Buddha is helping you to be able to see this about how an individual could steal and take something, so that you would be disinterested in doing this, and that you would then see the wise decision making and not doing these types of things. So the first one, the Buddha is talking about ordained practitioners who are unwholesome, right? Here, this is where he's saying that. But yet they're going out into the world and having all this admiration and respect from household practitioners. And while they're receiving all this admiration and respect, they're also collecting up alms food, meaning donations from the public. But yet they're unwholesome. And the Buddha is calling this individual a thief, because they're doing unwholesome things. They're not actually into training their mind and becoming more and more wholesome, and instead they're just going around doing unwholesome things, but yet they're collecting donations from the public. So they're not giving the public the role model of what a wholesome individual would be, so that they can then model their conduct and their practice on the path to enlightenment after that individual. So by an individual doing this, the Buddha is describing this as a person who's stolen, right? That they've taken this alms food, because they're not giving anything back. They're not giving this role model as being a wholesome individual so that the people around them can cultivate wisdom. And he's relating this to an individual who's going around and essentially killing. And an individual who's killing and slaying and destroying individuals, he's relating this to that type of situation. Then he's talking about this second type of thief as an individual who's unwholesome, and they've gained a certain level of mastery of the teachings of the Buddha, but yet they take those teachings and go out into the world and they claim that those teachings are their own. And now going out into the world, the Buddha is saying that this person is a thief. This is something that happened during the lifetime of the Buddha. It happens now that people will learn the teachings of the Buddha, and then they will go out and kind of rebrand it, repackage it, and make it look like and talk about as if it's their own teachings, where in reality it's the teachings of the Buddha. So the Buddha is calling this person a thief because they're stealing this idea that these teachings somehow belong to them, when in reality they were taught by the Buddha and they don't belong to any one person, but yet they belong to everybody. That's part of humanity. These are teachings that all of humanity can learn. But if one takes those teachings and kind of brands them and markets them as their own, now people don't necessarily understand that these are natural laws, that these are teachings of a Buddha. These are teachings that all of humanity can learn and understand. Maybe this person nowadays might even be selling these teachings or selling these courses and thinking that somehow they belong to them, when in reality these teachings aren't meant to be taught that way. They're not meant to have a price tag on them. They're meant to be accessible to everyone. So if somebody was to do these types of things where they take the teachings, claim them to be their own, rebrand them, and maybe even sell them to other people, the Buddha is referring to this person as a thief, because they've essentially stolen from humanity, where these teachings don't need to be marketed and purchased and all that kind of thing. They can be given away at no cost. So this would be a thief. Then the Buddha is describing a thief as an individual who looks at an individual who's in the Brahmin tradition, and this person is actually practicing perhaps the pure Brahmin tradition, but instead this individual is saying that no, they're not practicing that. So the Buddha is referring to this person as a thief. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, the other kind of tradition that people were well aware of that was widely practiced was Brahmanism. But today there's many different traditions. There's Muslim teachings, there's Christian teachings, there's Jainism, Judaism, so many different things. So if we were to go around and be judgmental and looking down on people and saying, oh, that person is no good because, they're a priest or they're a bishop or they're a cardinal and they're doing this and they're doing that and they're doing this wrong and that wrong. This is gossip and slander. But the individual is also, the way the Buddha is describing it here, could be considered a thief of essentially saying these things, and this is going to produce unwholesome results in their life. Then there's this fourth one where an individual is unwholesome and they're trying to persuade household practitioners to purchase these things in order to give it to them, which is any of these types of things that the Buddha is talking about here, that an individual is wanting these kinds of things and they're maybe casting it as, oh, can you buy this land for the community, where in reality the individual is trying to get it for themselves. And this would be a thief, because if someone's going to practice the second precept the way that the Buddha taught it, is that you just await what is given. You don't go out into the world and make request for people to buy you something because you're sharing the teachings, but you just wait for people to choose if they would like to make an offering to you. But if somebody's going out into the world and almost demanding or persuading, asking for people to buy things, and they're maybe casting it as if it's for the community, when in reality that person's keeping it for themselves, this is a situation where the Buddha is describing this as a thief. Even if this individual doesn't keep it for themselves, even if they still use it for the community, it's unwise to try to force somebody to practice generosity. That this isn't what the Buddha actually taught, and it's going to lead to unwholesome results. Because remember, the Buddha is teaching you this cause and effect, this natural law of karma, and these situations that he's describing is helping you to be able to see that natural law of karma. And then ultimately, the thing that we've been talking about throughout the first chapter of today and so forth is, declaring that an individual themselves are enlightened. If you went around and did that, the Buddha is saying this is actually a thief. This is an individual who is claiming that they're enlightened, but yet they have not yet attained enlightenment. Even claiming that one is enlightened, that is an indication that they're not enlightened. So if an individual goes out and is claiming that they're enlightened, you can be sure that they're actually not enlightened. The Buddha, during his lifetime, needed to tell people that he was enlightened and that he was a Buddha. He made this clear in his teachings. He said this at different times. But he was saying this in order so that people would understand what enlightenment is and what a Buddha is, because people didn't understand at that time. And today we have worldwide fame. Whereas if somebody went out into the world and tried to claim that they were a Buddha, people would know right away that that person's not a Buddha, because this person is maybe desiring to be well known in the world and be propped up and admired and worshipped and things like this, where that's the way sometimes people think about a Buddha today. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, it wasn't like that. There was no such thing as worldwide fame, because not everybody in the world could understand a common language to be able to have worldwide fame. So for the Buddha to describe to people that he was a Buddha was a way for him to teach humanity what a Buddha is and what a Buddha does. But today, if somebody claimed to be a Buddha, people would right away consider that person to have ego in their mind, and there's no way that that individual could be a Buddha. So the Buddha taught that it's unwise to go around and claim that you're actually enlightened, even though he needed to let people know that during his lifetime in order to teach what enlightenment is and what a Buddha is. We know nowadays what those things are, and we don't need to go around and claim that you're enlightened, because an individual who's enlightened, their mind is so peaceful and joyful, they don't want anything, they don't desire anything. So to go around and claim that one is enlightened is like desiring admiration or desiring respect or something like this from other people. Whereas if you're enlightened, you can just go about the world and be peaceful and joyful. You don't need other people to acknowledge that you're enlightened or to tell you that you're enlightened. You don't need that from other people. You can just go about your day and be peaceful and joyful. So these are the 5 things that the Buddha is relating to as a thief. And this is where the Buddha typically will kind of recast something or put it under a microscope and help you see a certain intricacy about something that was maybe thought about in one way during his lifetime, but then he's kind of giving this new light to it, where we oftentimes think about a thief as something who's stolen a material object, where here the Buddha is showing some other things and in some other ways that an individual could potentially be a thief in stealing something. And this is in order to help you to understand that it's unwise to do these kinds of things, because you're not interested in being a thief yourself. So you would understand that it would be unwise to do any of these kinds of things. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So we'll go to chapter 14. I think Pat was going to read next. So Pat, if you would like to read chapter 14, you're more than welcome to.
A noble disciple abandons wrong livelihood. Therein, monks, right view comes first. And how does right view come first? One understands wrong livelihood as wrong livelihood and right livelihood as right livelihood. This is one's right view. And what, monks, is wrong livelihood? Scheming, flattery, hinting, belittling, pursuing gain with gain. This is wrong livelihood. And what, monks, is right livelihood? Right livelihood, I say, is twofold. There is right livelihood that is affected by taints, fetters, taking part in merit, ripening in the material again, and there is right livelihood that is noble, taintless, world transcending, a factor of the path. And what, monks, is right livelihood that is affected by taints, taking part in merit, ripening in the material gain? Here, monks, a noble disciple abandons wrong livelihood and gains his living by right livelihood. This is right livelihood that is affected by taints, taking part in merit, ripening in the material gain. And what, monks, is right livelihood that is noble, taintless, world transcending, a factor of the path? The desisting from wrong livelihood, the abstaining, refraining, withholding from it in one whose mind is noble, whose mind is taintless, who possesses the noble path and is developing the noble path. This is right livelihood that is noble, taintless, world transcending, a factor of the path. One makes an effort to abandon wrong livelihood and to enter upon right livelihood. This is one's right effort. Mindfully, one abandons wrong livelihood. Mindfully, one enters upon and resides in right livelihood. This is one's right mindfulness. Thus, these three states run and circle around right livelihood. That is, right view, right effort, and right mindfulness. Therein, monks, right view comes first. And how does right view come first? In one of right view, right intention comes into being. In one of right intention, right speech comes into being. In one of right speech, right action comes into being. In one of right action, right livelihood comes into being. In one of right livelihood, right effort comes into being. In one of right effort, right mindfulness comes into being. In one of right mindfulness, right concentration comes into being. In one of right concentration, right wisdom comes into being. In one of right wisdom, right liberation comes into being. Thus, monks, the path of the disciple is in higher training possesses 8 factors. The Arahant possesses 10 factors. Therein, monks, right view comes first. And how does right view come first? In one of right view, wrong view is abolished, and the many evil, unwholesome states that originate with wrong view as condition are also abolished, and the many wholesome states that originate with right view as condition come to fulfillment by development. In one of right intention, wrong attention is abolished, and the many evil, unwholesome states that originate with wrong intention as condition are also abolished, and the many wholesome states that originate with right intention as condition come to fulfillment by development. In one of right speech, wrong speech is abolished. In one of right action, wrong action is abolished. In one of right livelihood, wrong livelihood is abolished. In one of right effort, wrong effort is abolished. In one of right mindfulness, wrong mindfulness is abolished. In one of right concentration, wrong concentration is abolished. In one of right wisdom, wrong wisdom is abolished. In one of right liberation, wrong liberation is abolished. And the many evil, unwholesome states that originate with wrong liberation as condition are also abolished. And the many wholesome states that originate with right liberation as condition come to fulfillment by development. Thus, monks, there are 20 factors on the side of the wholesome and 20 factors on the side of the unwholesome. This teaching's discourse on the Great 40 has been set rolling and cannot be stopped by any ascetic or Brahmin or God or Mara or Brahma or anyone in the world. Monks, if an ascetic or Brahmin thinks that this teaching's discourse on the Great 40 should be criticized and rejected, then there are 10 legitimate deductions from his assertions that would provide grounds for finding fault with him here and now. If that worthy one finds fault with right view, then he would honor and praise those ascetic and Brahmins who are of wrong view. If that worthy one finds fault with right intention, then he would honor and praise those ascetics and Brahmins who are of wrong intention. If that worthy one finds fault with right speech, then he would honor and praise those ascetics and Brahmins who are of wrong speech. If that worthy one finds fault with right action, then he would honor and praise those ascetics and Brahmins who are of wrong action. If that worthy one finds fault with right livelihood, then he would honor and praise those ascetics and Brahmins who are of wrong livelihood. If that worthy one finds fault with right effort, then he would honor and praise those ascetics and Brahmins who are of wrong effort. If that worthy one finds fault with right mindfulness, then he would honor and praise those ascetics and Brahmins who are of wrong mindfulness. If that worthy one finds fault with right concentration, then he would honor and praise those ascetics and Brahmins who are of wrong concentration. If that worthy one finds fault with right wisdom, then he would honor and praise those ascetics and Brahmins who are of wrong wisdom. If that worthy one finds fault with right liberation, then he would honor and praise those ascetics and Brahmins who are of wrong liberation. If any ascetic or Brahmin thinks that this teaching's discourse on the Great 40 should be criticized and rejected, then there are 10 legitimate deductions from his assertions that would provide grounds for finding fault with him here and now. Monks, even those teachers from Okala, Vasa, and Bahana who held the doctrine of non-casualty, the doctrine of non-action, and the doctrine of nihilism, would not think that this discourse of the teachings on the Great 40 should be criticized and rejected. Why is that? For fear of blame, attack, and evidence that they are incorrect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So there's a lot going on in this discourse. So we're going to walk through it slowly so that you guys can understand each piece of it and kind of each segment of this particular discourse. This discourse is really honing in on the totality of right livelihood. Because as you guys might remember back to when I teach the foundational classes about the Eightfold Path, I teach the first fold and the second fold of purification as it relates to wrong livelihood and right livelihood. I typically will teach the first fold of purification in those classes, and then I guide people to say, hey, if you're interested in the full teachings on right livelihood, you might consult volume 12, chapter 14. That is this chapter. So let's walk through first the first fold of purification, and then we'll talk about the second fold of purification. So here the Buddha is saying that in order to make your way towards this right livelihood, remember, a livelihood is how you choose to sustain your life in the world, because it's important to do so without causing harm. He's saying that that starts with right view, that you need to first understand right view, which is the Four Noble Truths. You can see that in the Eightfold Path, that he helps you to be able to see that in order to get to that first factor of right view, you need to cultivate the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, understanding that it's craving, desire, attachment that is causing your discontent feelings. That is to get to right view. And now, once an individual has right view, then an individual can understand wrong livelihood as wrong livelihood, and they can understand right livelihood as right livelihood. They can understand the difference between these two things, because you understand that any kind of discontent feelings that you experience as part of right view is that it's coming from your own mind, that it's coming from your own cravings, desires, attachments. It's not the outside world. It's not your boss. It's not your coworkers. It's not these kinds of things that are causing you to experience discontentedness at work. Instead, it's one's own mind. So in order to get to a right livelihood, you need to first have right view. So now, once an individual understands right view and that your discontent feelings are coming from your own mind, you understand that any harms that you're experiencing in your day-to-day life, in your work, is coming from your own decisions. So the Buddha guides you then to be able to understand, to eliminate scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain as part of a livelihood. Scheming is where you have corruption. Flattering is where you have insincere comments just to get people to buy things from you. Hinting is where you're unclear about your job or activities, where you're not being clear and concise, for example, in briefing your boss about what it is that you're doing. Belittling is to have degrading and diminishing talk about your coworkers, your competition, your business partners, your customers, looking down on people and talking in degrading and disparaging ways. That's not going to produce wholesome results for you. And then pursuing gain with gain is just taking a job for the money, and that's all you care about, that you don't really care about the product or service that's being offered. You're just there for the money, and you're just there for the paycheck. If you're doing any of these 5 things as part of a livelihood, then it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. And the Buddha gives you further guidance on right livelihood in other parts of his teachings, where he teaches you to abandon 5 livelihoods. I have this down here, all the way down here, where he teaches you these trades to not be plied, where he says how it's unwise for you to have business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness and poison. So you can see this in the words of the Buddha here, that he's guiding individuals that it would be unwise to do these things, because if you're sustaining your life off of business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness and poisons, this is causing harm to other beings, and you're sustaining your life off of causing harm to others. So the Buddha teaches you as part of the first fold of purification that it's unwise to have any of those 5 livelihoods, or to do scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, or pursuing gain with gain within your livelihood. Because if you do any of these kinds of things, you're not going to have a fulfilling livelihood. So for example, if you took a job where you were just pursuing gain with gain, and that's all you cared about was the money, at some point that craving is going to be diminished and extinguished, and now you're doing this livelihood that feels very mundane, and you're not going to feel fulfilled and satisfied in the work that you're doing. You're probably going to drag yourself to work each day, because initially you were really motivated to go to that job because you were getting paid a certain amount of money and you were so happy with that money. But eventually that money is not going to create happiness for you anymore, and now you're going to want more and more and more and more, and you're not going to like this livelihood that you're functioning in any longer. You're going to now feel very bored and mundane in that livelihood. So the Buddha teaches you to eliminate these 5 things, as well as those 5 types of livelihood. Now this is what would be called the first fold of purification. And you can see that here, where the Buddha says right livelihood has 2 folds. Right? This first fold that he's talking about is a livelihood that is affected by the taints, meaning that you're making decisions still based in the pollutions of the mind, that you're actually practicing merit, meaning that you're practicing generosity to help the teachings of the Buddha be shared in the world so that other people can get access to those, and you're experiencing this material gain, right? So you can get to a point where you're practicing right livelihood to the first fold of purification, where you are practicing generosity with whatever money that you're acquiring and resources that you're acquiring. You are acquiring this material gain, but you still have the fetters involved in your livelihood. For example, let's just say that somebody was a police officer and they had a lot of ego and conceit, and that's the main reason why they're interested in doing this job, because they walk around with their chest all puffed out and like, look at me, I'm a police officer. Not every police officer has the fetters involved in their mind, but let's just use this example as if somebody does, now walking around with their chest all puffed out, look at me, and all this conceit. They might be practicing merit, they're experiencing this material gain, they're not doing one of those 5 livelihoods like business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness and poisons, and they're not scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, or pursuing gain with gain, but they still have this conceit and perhaps even other pollutions that are in their mind affecting them in their day-to-day life. So this is a level of purification that at least they're not scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, or pursuing gain with gain, and at least they're not doing one of those 5 livelihoods. So there's going to be a certain amount of benefit for them in that livelihood, but their mind's not completely purified yet, and they're still having issues in their day-to-day life at work. That ego that they have at work, that they're choosing to operate through that conceit, it's producing unwholesome results for them in their day-to-day life. And that's not where you're interested in staying, but that's ultimately the first level of purification, is to get to that point where at least you are practicing the first fold of purification. And because your mind is not fully purified and you do have the fetters in the mind, it's going to affect your livelihood to a certain degree. But ultimately, what you would like to get to is this second fold of purification, where sure, you're not doing any of those 5 livelihoods of business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. And you're also not scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, or pursuing gain with gain. But this particular livelihood that you're doing, your mind is taintless, meaning none of the taints are involved in your livelihood whatsoever. You're not walking around with ego and arrogance and pride. You don't have sensual desire or ill will. None of those fetters, of the 10 individual fetters, are arising as part of your day-to-day life. And then in this situation, your livelihood is going to be fully purified, and you're going to have complete peace and complete joy when you're at work. As long as you have the fetters in your mind and you're operating through those at work, you're still going to have certain day-to-day struggles and difficulties in your day-to-day work. But when you eliminate those pollutions of mind, where your mind is now taintless, and you're also not scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, or pursuing gain with gain, and you're not practicing one of those wrong livelihoods of weapons, the living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, or poisons, when you are up to that level, and then you further have purified your mind to now function through the fetters, now you're in that second fold of purification. And that's the ultimate goal if you're going to experience enlightenment, that you need to get to this right livelihood that is taintless, that the pollutions of mind are completely eliminated in regards to your livelihood. Because you can get to a point where in your livelihood you don't have any of these taints involved, but you still have pollutions in other parts of your life. That maybe in your personal relationships, for example, that conceit is still arising, or sensual desire is still arising, or something like that. But in terms of getting to a purified livelihood, that second fold of purification, you need to be able to completely eradicate all the pollutions and operate through that for an extended period of time in your livelihood. So this would be the second fold of purification. So the Buddha here is now describing this first fold of purification here. That he's saying that this first fold of purification is that the mind is still affected by the taints, right? That the individual is practicing generosity, helping others to get access to the teachings, because they've seen enough progress at that point that they understand that these teachings are helpful, but they still have these taints in their mind. And then they're also experiencing a certain amount of material gain as a result of that livelihood. So an individual is going to abandon any kind of wrong livelihood, meaning that they're not practicing scheming, flattering, hinting, or pursuing gain with gain, and they're not practicing the business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. So this is the first fold of purification right here. And you would like to work to get to that point first. And that's an accomplishment for you to be able to experience that first fold of purification. But then you're not interested in stopping there. You would like to move further, where now the Buddha is talking about the second fold of purification, which is what we just talked about, that the mind is no longer experiencing pollutions at work, that the mind is taintless, right? And now you're going to be fully enthused with the work that you're doing. You're going to have ambition and motivation. It doesn't even feel like work anymore. You're collecting money, perhaps. You're collecting a certain amount of ability to sustain your life, but that's almost secondary to what it is that you're actually doing in your livelihood, that you feel fully enthused and motivated and having ambition to do this work. It almost doesn't even feel like work anymore, that you enjoy it so much. That's when you know that your mind's in this right livelihood, because it doesn't even feel like work. Okay? So now, once one has applied right effort to abandon wrong livelihood, and they enter upon this right livelihood, they've done so through right effort. So right effort is really important, because that's where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities and cultivating certain wholesome qualities. So in order to get to a right livelihood, you're going to need to apply right effort. You're not going to be able to get to a right livelihood without right effort. So you're tweaking all of these factors at one time in order to be able to move the mind to any particular aspect of the path. Then the Buddha is saying that this mindfulness is helping an individual to accomplish right livelihood as well. Because in order to apply right effort, you need to have right mindfulness, where you have awareness of mind. So in your day-to-day work, let's just say that your conceit is arising. You're in that first fold of purification, and you see the conceit arising. You're trying to get to that second fold of purification. Well, it's your right mindfulness that is helping you to be able to see that conceit arise. And now you apply right effort to abandon that and eliminate that out of the mind when you're at work in day-to-day life. So it's your right effort and your right mindfulness that is going to actually help you get to a right livelihood, because you need to be able to see these mental objects, these pollutions arising in your day-to-day livelihood, in order to be able to abandon those, so that now you can fully purify the mind and get to that second fold of purification. So then the Buddha is saying that right livelihood essentially has right view, right effort, and right mindfulness that is going to help you to be able to accomplish right livelihood. Because you need that right view to be able to understand anything that's happening at work, it's coming from your own mind, that it's not other people that are causing these things. And then you need that right effort and right mindfulness so that when your pollutions are arising in your day-to-day work, you eliminate those and cut it out, so that that way you can ultimately purify the mind and experience peace and joy in your day-to-day work. You know, your work doesn't have to be a drag. It doesn't have to feel like you're dragging yourself to work every day. You can thoroughly enjoy the work that you're doing. So then the Buddha goes on further, and he talks about right view coming first. And now once an individual has right view, there's these other factors that come into play. This is where I share with you guys, you can see it in other discourses where the Buddha says it very clearly, where he talks about how when he teaches a brand new student, he teaches them right view first. That right view comes first. That's why whenever I teach brand new students, I always start with right view first, because that's what's going to allow all these other factors to come into play. That you're not going to be able to cultivate right intention, for example, if you don't first have right view. So all of these factors are building one on another on another. And he ultimately gets to down here where he talks about right wisdom and right liberation. This is part of the tenfold path. It's the eightfold path that is leading to enlightenment. But by the time someone gets to enlightenment, they're actually going to be practicing an extra two factors, which is right wisdom and right liberation. And you can see that down here in this next sentence, that he says that the path of the disciple in higher training possesses 8 factors. Right? So when someone's making their way towards this higher training, they're practicing the eightfold path. But the Arahant, the enlightened being, is practicing the tenfold path. They have 10 factors. This right wisdom and right concentration are the extra 2 factors. There's nothing to teach you there in terms of, like, with right intention, for example, there's 3 aspects, right? There's the intention of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. And you would be able to understand what those things mean, and then you would be able to practice those, and that's what's going to then help you to be able to practice right speech, for example. And then when you're understanding right speech, you understand there's 4 aspects there of eliminating lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. And then there's more detail, of course, with the 5 factors of well-spoken speech and others. So each of these factors in the Eightfold Path, there are certain aspects to each one of them, and there's a certain practice that you need to learn and practice to be able to accomplish that. Right wisdom and right liberation aren't that way. That what right wisdom is you will be practicing right wisdom when you fully cultivate the Eightfold Path. When you fully understand the Eightfold Path and you're fully practicing the Eightfold Path for an extended period of time, and your mind is completely awake to the path to enlightenment, now an individual has right wisdom. Right wisdom is to fully understand the path to enlightenment. And you understand it inside and out, backwards and forwards. You understand it 100%. And you can talk about it with ease because you understand it so well. So that's what right wisdom is. So there's nothing extra to teach you about right wisdom, because right wisdom is a culmination of all the other teachings of the Buddha, that once an individual learns all those teachings, independently verifying them and practicing them on a day-to-day basis, they will then be practicing right wisdom. Now, if an individual has right wisdom, they fully understand the path to enlightenment, they will then be experiencing right liberation. What right liberation is where your mind's completely liberated, that it no longer experiences any discontent feelings, that the mind's completely free, there's no pollutions in the mind, the mind is now liberated, that it's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. The mind is enlightened. So an arahant, an enlightened being, is practicing right wisdom. They fully cultivated the wisdom of the path, and because of that, their mind is now liberated. They're experiencing right liberation. But that comes from having understood and practiced the entire Eightfold Path. So the Eightfold Path is what's leading to the culmination of right wisdom and right liberation. So you can see that, because I've mentioned that throughout this program a few times, but you can see it here in the words of the Buddha, how an individual is practicing the Eightfold Path, but an enlightened being is practicing the Tenfold Path. So now the Buddha goes on further from here, that with right view coming first, and understanding the things that we've talked about so far, an individual then starts to culminate other wholesome states, and they're further developing the mind. And the Buddha is now going through and talking about, by one understanding right view, for example, they abolish wrong view. By understanding right intention, they abolish wrong intention, and so forth and so on, that they now fully cultivate the entire path. And this is what's going to lead to one's enlightenment. And these are the 20 factors that is going to lead to your enlightenment. That by having right speech, you've abolished wrong speech. And that's what the Buddha is saying down here, that there's these 20 factors for the wholesome. But then there's these 20 factors for the unwholesome. And he calls this discourse the Great 40. Right? This is a teaching that he taught to be able to help people to see what is wholesome and what is unwholesome regarding the Eightfold Path, and be able to practice it in that way. And the Buddha is saying that if an individual gets to the point where they understand this Great 40, this discourse of the Great 40, they understand that this is the truth, that this is actually what leads to the complete liberation of the mind, that an individual would not be able to criticize or reject this teaching because they've understood it fully. And now an individual having understood it fully, they would then be able to know the truth and ultimately have this right wisdom and right liberation. But an individual who finds fault in this right view, meaning that they don't understand it, they haven't fully cultivated the wisdom about it, then they're going to honor and praise someone who has wrong view. So this connects back to what Leo was asking earlier. If somebody, for example, has ego and they don't understand the difficulties and struggles because of the ego, they might honor and praise somebody who has ego, right? Because they can't identify that ego and they don't understand how unwise that is. So someone with ego might choose to spend time around somebody who has ego, right? So it's the same thing, is that if somebody doesn't understand what right view is, they might honor and praise somebody who has wrong view. Right? If someone has any of these other qualities, let's just say if someone finds fault in right speech, they don't understand the harms in lying, slandering, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. They don't understand the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, speaking at the proper time, what you say is true, gentle, beneficial, with a mind of loving kindness. If someone finds fault in the Buddha's teachings on right speech, that means they haven't fully cultivated the wisdom of it. They're not actually practicing it. They don't actually see the benefits of it because they haven't fully cultivated their mind. And now that person will potentially honor and praise people who have wrong speech. Maybe someone's regularly speaking with profanity or degrading and diminishing and belittling others. And people might think that, look at this person, they're so funny, they're degrading and diminishing other people. So this individual who finds fault in right speech, it's because they haven't understood it, they haven't cultivated the wisdom about it, and they haven't practiced it to see the transformation that is going to occur to your own mind and in your relationships. So therefore, they're going to honor and praise people who have wrong speech because they don't understand the wisdom of it. And the Buddha is saying the same thing about each one of these factors, right? Someone who doesn't understand and finds fault with right wisdom. It means that they don't have right wisdom. They don't fully understand it. So therefore, people who have wrong wisdom, they're going to praise that person. Or someone who finds fault with right liberation. Right? Right liberation is the mind's completely peaceful and joyful. Where if somebody has wrong liberation, meaning that their mind still gets angry and frustrated and agitated or annoyed, someone could honor and praise that person. Wow, look at them. They're so emotional. They're so passionate about their work. They're crying. They're so impassioned with their work. Wow, I really admire that person. Well, that's somebody who doesn't understand right liberation, understanding that discontentedness is shaking up the mind, and it's ultimately going to lead to unwholesome results. Sometime you might see a celebrity or a political leader who gives an impassioned speech where it might be real bitter and harsh and hostile and degrading and diminishing. They might even get emotional to the point of crying. And some people admire that kind of thing, and they think, wow, that person's such a great leader. But that's because they don't understand right liberation. So therefore, they're going to praise and honor someone who has a wrong liberation. Right? So now the Buddha is basically getting to the point where he's talking about an individual who understands the Great 40 wouldn't be able to criticize or reject what he's teaching because they've fully cultivated their mind and they understand that their mind's completely liberated. It's no longer experiencing discontentedness. They've attained the final goal of this enlightened mental state. Then he's saying, even those teachers who are learning from these other people, and these other people during the lifetime of the Buddha weren't teaching the true path to enlightenment. They were teaching other teachings that weren't the actual teachings. One of them was teaching a doctrine of non-causality, meaning what this individual was saying is that there's no such thing as the natural law of karma, that it's not cause and effect that leads to any particular result. And this other individual was teaching a doctrine of non-action, that it's not your actions that lead to any particular result. And then this third person was teaching this nihilism, which I don't remember 100% of what that is, but maybe some of you guys do. I don't recall. I've looked this up at one point, but he was teaching this particular doctrine. And the Buddha is saying, even those people who don't understand the natural law of karma, who don't understand these other teachings, even they wouldn't criticize or reject this great 40, because they understand that if they did reject it, that they would have this blame, attack, and there would be evidence to prove that they're incorrect, because the teachings of the Buddha are independently verifiable. So if these individuals criticized or rejected this discourse on the Great 40, then it would be very easy to prove that they're incorrect. So this is a discourse that is going really deep into some of the teachings of the Buddha, as you guys can see. But ultimately, what you would like to be able to get out of this is, what is the first fold of purification for your livelihood, and what is the second fold of purification? And if you don't understand what those two things are, let me know, because you would like to understand those two things, because ultimately you're going to need to get to the second fold of purification. The third thing that you can understand from this discourse is what is right wisdom and right liberation, because the other 8 factors you've learned in other settings where I've taught those. But here you would need to be sure that you understand what right wisdom and right liberation is, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're going to be practicing those 2 factors of the path. So those are essentially what you would like to look at with this discourse, and making sure that you draw conclusions and understand those 3 things. What is the first fold of purification of livelihood? What is the second fold? And what is right wisdom and right liberation? If you understand these 3 things, then you've gained the wisdom that you need from this discourse, and now you can practice that. So let me know what questions you guys have on this particular chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hello, Teacher David. So I have been working as a CNA for approximately 3 years now. And it's just something that I just enjoy. There's no like, oh, I've got to go to work. It's just enjoyment. And I see the benefits that it provides the people that I care for. But my question to you is it beneficial for me to say and recognize I have completed the first fold of right livelihood, the first fold there? Is that beneficial for me to say?
It's helpful for you to know for yourself that you've gotten to this first fold of purification, because then you know the work that you need to do from this point forward is in the second fold. You need to be able to make sure that when you're being asked to stay with a certain client that you don't have any disgruntledness, you don't have any frustration, you don't even have the slightest annoyance when you're dealing with your work on a day-to-day basis. And no aspect of your work, whether it's your drive to work, whether it's your time at the job, whether it's afterwards, that there's no guilt, there's no shame, there's no fear, there's no frustration, there's not even the slightest little bit of ickiness or discontentedness related to that particular job that you're doing. If somebody dies, you don't have any discontentedness related to that you just understand that this is impermanence. Whereas if your mind's holding on to your client and they die, you'll experience discontentedness, and that's based in the mind still having pollutions within your livelihood. So once you know that you've accomplished the first fold of purification, now you know that you really need to pay attention with your mindfulness or awareness of mind to then apply right effort in your day-to-day work. And this is what's ultimately going to lead to your right livelihood, because now you can fully purify your mind throughout your day-to-day work, and you can really pay attention to that. So if you've already accomplished the first fold of purification, now it's a matter of kind of stamping out any residual pollutions that are at play in your livelihood.
Well, then maybe Teacher David, you could help me try to identify something here. So not only do I have private clients, but I have a position within a facility. And I've been with this facility for a little while now, and I have been able to, I don't want to even like say create, but an environment that at one time on this shift was very hostile, and there was a lot of animosity. And, myself personally, I did not partake in that stuff, and I just focused in on what the importance of the job was. So it has been brought to my attention that other people have noticed this way of conducting myself at work. And what is happening is now is when shifts, because I'm a per diem type person, so when shifts become available, people are coming to me and they're like, "Oh, Marcy, please pick this shift up with me. It would be such a great shift. It would do really, really great." And I know that picking up the shift is beneficial to the residents of the facility. But then I also recognize this person has a craving here. So, I find that I get a little like, how would I say, like unclear of like, do I give into this craving and do it because it's beneficial to the client? Or do I say, no, let me think about it, the art of the friendly no, and not feed into that person's craving? Because I do notice in the mind, and I will tell the mind, knock it off, Marcy, knock it off. Don't let this feed your ego. Let it go. This is not what you want to do. You just got to let it go. So I do feel that type of like, when people are coming to me like that I do get a little bit like, wow, I must be doing a really good job. And then it's like, nope, stop it, knock it off, So what's your guidance, Teacher David?
Sure. So whenever you're making decisions, you're always interested in basing that in discernment, wise decision making. And that wise decision making is based on this being who you are, Marcy. If I make this decision, is it going to produce wholesome results, wholesome benefits, or is it going to produce unwholesome results or unwholesome karma? And you need to make your decisions independently of what is or is not happening with other people. Because if you make decisions based on discernment, you're not causing harm to other beings. So therefore, it's going to be beneficial for you and those around you. So you need to be able to look at your middle way and not factoring in what may or may not exist for somebody else. So if that particular shift, if you were to say, no, I'm not going to take that shift, and you're only doing that, the only reason why you're doing that is because you're not interested in allowing this other person's mind's craving to exist, well, now maybe you don't have the resources that you need in order to sustain your life, and you're only doing that because it's beneficial for the other person's mind to not have this craving. This would not be discernment. This would be unwise. So you need to
Okay.
make your decisions independently of what may or may not be going on in somebody else's mind. If there's a situation where you can help somebody to eliminate their craving, but you can do that in a way that's not causing harm to yourself, then this could be a wise decision. So in that situation, there's many different potential options, but shouldn't make your priority be to help this person eliminate their craving. Your priority should be is how can I produce wholesome results for this being, Marcy. And if taking the shift is that, okay, you take the shift. And even if this other person gets all this pleasure and excitement because you're taking the shift, that's on them. That's their craving that's causing that. And now you're choosing to take the shift. What you might choose to do in that situation, knowing what their mind's doing, if you're going to choose to take the shift, is you might say, hey, look, I tell you what, I can actually take this shift, but I would like to just let you know that in the future, I might not always be able to take shifts, but I'm very pleased to take this shift today, and I can surely do that. And of course, they're going to get all excited. Yay, Marcy, you're taking the shift. Oh, this is going to be so great, right? And that's on them. Your mind's unaffected by that. You stay stable, you stay steady, you know what's going on in your own mind. If you can delay the decision for 30 minutes or even an hour, and that helps them to calm their mind down, great. That's wonderful, but don't feel like you have to do that. That's not your priority. Your priority is to make sure you're making wise decisions for this being Marcy. If as a secondary, you're able to help people in some ways to be able to skillfully help them to eliminate their cravings, perfect. But that shouldn't be your priority, because this practice is all about your growth and your development.
Okay. Thank you, Teacher David. That actually brings some clarity for me. And then, so my last little piece of that was when I experience that, that little feed of the ego there, that, Marcy is great thing, and I cut it off, should I if I can take a pause and get that to be completely non-relevant in the mind and the body before I make a decision?
If possible, you can. What you're describing is what the Buddha talks about here is having the right mindfulness. You see that conceit arising in your livelihood, and then you're applying right effort to cut that off and let it go. And if you're able to step away from that conversation, and that's what you need in order to apply more right effort to get rid of that conceit out of the mind, that's only going to help you. So you could choose to do it that way, but that doesn't mean you need to always do it that way. Maybe your manager or your supervisor needs a decision in the next, 1 minute, because if you don't take the shift, they're going to offer it to someone else. Then if you need to go ahead and accept that position, go ahead and accept that shift. But then in the background, you're cutting off this conceit, and that's going to help you to purify your mind.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Teacher David. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. It looks like Yusuf has a question. Go ahead, sir.
It was a little bit difficult for me to follow what you both were saying, but I will ask based on what I understood. Someone asked Marcy to take the shift, and Marcy said that they might be so happy because me taking the shift, and you said to not make that individual happiness your priority. Don't make it a priority for yourself to make him let go of his cravings and his conditioned happiness. But I have heard you said before to not always maybe do this kind of generosity to people in work so that they don't get attached. So how you are here now saying to not make it your priority to help?
Yeah, I've never said to make a priority to help other people to get to enlightenment, because that's not what your goal in this path is. Your goal in this path is for you to get to enlightenment yourself. Where possible, if you can help somebody to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, then you can do that. But if you're doing that based in harming yourself, that would be unwise. So you need to be able to see the different variables involved here. That if you have a situation where, let's just say Marcy doesn't need the money, and let's just say that she's got some money stacked up from some other jobs that she's been working, and now she could take that shift, but she doesn't really need to. And maybe now she's more interested in helping this person to not have that craving. In that situation, she could potentially say, hey, you know what? I'm going to need to think about that. If you need to talk with some other people about that shift, go ahead and do that. But for me, I'm just going to think about it for a while. And if I can work that shift, I will let you know. Right? And in this situation, she's choosing to help this person to eliminate some craving, but that's not causing harm to herself because she's already got this extra money over here. So this is where I've shared with you, Yusuf, that in any given situation, there's always many variables that you need to be able to look at. The Buddhist teachings are never always do it this way and never do it that way. That's absolutes. That would be a permanent decision in every single situation. But you understand the universal truth of impermanence and that there's many different variables, and you need to look at all those variables moving to this higher consciousness and make decisions in any one given way. So when you're looking at all the different variables, in one situation you might make that decision in one way, and in another situation you might make that decision in another way. So what I'm helping you to be able to do is see all these different options so that you can then make decisions without the pollutions in your mind. And this is what's ultimately going to lead to the purification of your mind.
So for clearance, let's imagine I work in a restaurant and someone like always asks me to take his shift, maybe, and I have like no problem with that, nothing bad gonna come to me. And you would advise to not always say yes so that the other individual won't be attached to you. You would say such a thing, to not always say yes.
Right. So if you're in a restaurant and you're working and you have plenty of money, and by saying no to this shift, it's not going to cause you any harm whatsoever, then it can be wise for you in that situation to decline taking that shift. And I teach people, like Marcy was saying, the art of the friendly no, how to say no without saying no. It can be wise for you to do that to be able to help this other person, but it's not causing you any harm. But in another situation, even though you're choosing to accept this shift and this other person is maintaining their craving and maybe even it's feeding their craving, that could be potentially a wise decision for you as well, because now you actually need the money. So that's where you need to be able to look at all the different variables and decide in what situation would be wise for you to do one thing versus another. It's never always one way and never another way. You need to be able to look at the variables and decide what is wise there. That's where the discernment is coming in, wise decision making.
Okay.
All right. So it looks like Leo has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I think it's here also this question that there are many or there are different options, but there was a guy who asked me if I want to, or I asked him if he knows if I can work somewhere. And then he made a WhatsApp group with, I think, 8 or 9 people and said, you guys wrote me if you want to work, or you guys are interested in working for this employer here. But he only has 4 places available. 4 people can work there. So first come, first serve. And I thought, I actually already earned some money. So I don't need it so much. So maybe I look if the other people are interested, and if there's still a place open, I can also join. But the truth is, of course, I can need this money too, right? I'm doing this Thailand trip. After that, I will need to find a job, so I can have more money in my bag. So, what do you think in this situation? Would it have been better if? Or what would you tend to? Like, hey, Leo, it's not about, it's about your practice and about looking, hey, first come, first serve. You thought you were one of the first who thought, take the job. What do you think about that?
So this is where I never tell you guys, exactly what you should do in any one given situation until I fully understand all the variables. But even then, I'm going to help you cultivate wisdom. I can't say to you, Leo, absolutely take the job or never take the job, because that would be an absolute, right? But it sounds like what you're saying is you need this job, you need the money, and it would be wise for you to take the job. That's what it sounds like you're saying. If you're choosing not to take the job just because you want somebody else to be able to get the money, you're not having loving kindness and compassion for this being who you are, right? You need to be able to have loving kindness and compassion for this being, that if you are not going to be able to acquire resources and money in any other way, and you're choosing not to take the job just solely so that other people could have it, you're causing harm to this being who you are. So you're producing and generating unwholesome karma here. So you need to be able to set all that aside and be able to decide for yourself, is this wise for you to take this job? And if this is the job that you can take and you have the ability to take it and you have the skills to take it, there's no harm in you taking that job. And if somebody else is not able to get the job because you've taken it, you haven't caused any harm there, because like you said, it's first come, first serve. So you need to decide for yourself whether that's the job that is wise for you, whether that's what you would like to take, and you make your decisions independently of other people, that you don't prioritize somebody else. Because in describing this, somebody might think that, oh, this sounds selfish. No, it's not selfish to take care of this being and make sure that you take care of this being. And if it's first come, first serve, and you choose to accept this job and this other person is unable to take the job because of that, they're unable to take the job because of that, because of their decisions. They chose not to ask for the job in a timely fashion. It was their decisions that led to their inability to get that job. It wasn't your decisions that led to the inability of them getting the job. So you need to be able to make wise decisions that are going to produce wholesome karma for you.
Okay. I'm not sure if I really generated or unwholesome karma here, because as I shared in the beginning, I already had enough money for the trip in Thailand and for the life afterwards in Germany back. I knew that the other guys don't had this. They didn't earn money before, and I knew these people. So, and it was only for 2 weeks, the job for 2 weeks. So here, I think I have to figure out myself. It doesn't need to be unwise. It doesn't need to be an unwise decision not to take the job. But of course, everybody can need more money, right? That's what I want to say. You never know what happens later. Maybe you have an accident and you have to pay so much money that all your money is gone, and then you would think back and say, oh, the 2 weeks of work would have been very, very good.
Yeah, this is where there's a middle way, right? You need to figure out what that middle way is. And it seems like that's what you figured out, that you had enough money, you didn't need to take this job, and you decided not to take the job, right? And that's not causing any harm there, because you already have the money that you need. But if you chose not to take the job and you don't have the money that you need, this is where it's causing you harm, right? So you need to be able to look at all those variables. Me, being a teacher, not knowing about all the variables in your life, I wouldn't be able to tell you that. It's only you that would be able to come to that conclusion. I can guide you in how to come to that conclusion, but I can't tell you 100% because I don't know all the variables.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. I don't see any questions anywhere else, so I'm going to move to the next chapter. Oh, Yusuf has a question. Go ahead, sir.
No, it's volunteering to read.
Oh, you would like to read? Okay, sure. So this is chapter 15 that we're coming up to here. So we're going to have a whole series of discourses here, which are going to help you to have accomplishment in view. We'll talk about what this is after Yusuf reads, but go ahead, sir.
I would like to understand, when you make us or let us read these discourses, is it only for the beneficial of reading, or to have some benefits also? Because I would like to read in a little bit of a strange way to let go of certain cravings. So I'm asking if that's fine to train my mind while reading.
Yeah, you should be training your mind all the time. It's a full-time job. I invite you guys to read because I think it contributes to the class and you guys benefit from reading. I think that it makes the class more full rather than me just sitting here reading all these chapters that you guys get to participate in. It becomes a community interactive event rather than just one person reading. So I invite you guys to read so that you guys can benefit in participation, but also it helps you to overcome personal existence view and conceit as well by reading.
Okay, great. I also would like to know that that little dot in the end of the sentence, what do you call it, English people?
This here?
Yeah, the above, the first line.
The first line. This here?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a period, or some people call it a full stop.
Okay, so 6 cases of incapability by one accomplished in view per discourse. Monks, comma, there are these 6 cases of incapability, period. What 6? Question mark. One accomplished in view is, colon, number 1, incapable of considering any conditioned phenomenon, thing as permanent, semicolon. Number 2, incapable of considering any conditioned phenomenon, thing as pleasurable, semicolon. Number 3, incapable of considering any phenomenon, thing as a self, semicolon. Number 4, incapable of doing a grave act that brings immediate results, semicolon. Number 5, incapable of restoring to the belief that purity, enlightenment comes about through superstitious and how does that pronounce?
Auspicious.
Auspicious acts, semicolon. Number 6, incapable of seeking a person worthy of offerings outside here, period. These are the 6 cases of incapability, full stop.
Okay.
Thank you, teacher.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we're going to read about 4 discourses here where the Buddha is going to help you to understand what it means to have accomplishment in view. Because there's something called right view, and you need to get established in right view. That's the very beginning of the path to enlightenment, to understand the Four Noble Truths and get established in right view where you understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings and that it's your own craving, desire, attachment. And start looking inward whenever you experience discontentedness, and that's what's going to help you to be able to purify the mind and eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. So up front, you're getting established in right view to understand the Four Noble Truths and practice them on a day-to-day basis. But then in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you need to practice what's called accomplishment in view, where you now move beyond establishment of right view and you now have accomplishment in view. And there's 4 discourses here that are going to help you to understand what accomplishment in view is. This is the first one. Accomplishment in view is to move beyond just understanding right view and to now start practicing these things. This first one, where we've got the 3 universal truths, where the Buddha is saying that an individual who's got accomplishment in view, cultivated that certain amount of wisdom, that they would be incapable of considering anything to be permanent, any conditioned object as being permanent, because you've already investigated the universal truth of impermanence, and to be practicing accomplishment in view, you would fully understand that universal truth. The same thing with the universal truth of discontentedness, that you would understand conditioned feelings, you would understand how the mind's longing, yearning with craving, desire, attachment, and your mind would be incapable of considering this thing to be pleasurable because you understand the harm that a conditioned pleasant feeling is going to occur in the mind. By the time you get to enlightenment, you understand that the mind is experiencing unconditioned happiness and unconditioned joy, but in terms of conditional objects, you would be incapable of considering an object to be pleasurable because you understand, like, for example, this car is impermanent. And if you consider that, wow, I'm going to grab onto this car and that's how I'm going to get my pleasantness and I'm going to get all this happiness because of the car, you would have already penetrated by having accomplishment in view, that you would understand, like, yeah, I need this car, I need this transportation, but I'm not going to source my pleasant feelings from this car, because if I get these pleasant feelings from this car, then when it gets a scratch, then I'm going to have painful feelings. And so you would be incapable of considering that car to be pleasurable, and you understand that this conditioned object is impermanent. Then you would be incapable of considering any object to be a self, that you understand that this body is not you, this mind is not you, that you can't identify any one particular thing that is a self, right? Then beyond that, there's these three additional ones in this particular discourse where you're incapable of doing a grave act that brings immediate results. You're going to understand this here in a moment, because the Buddha flushes this out here in the next discourse, where some people refer to these things as the 5 heinous acts or the 5 heinous crimes. So you'll see what that is in a moment. But the Buddha is saying if you have accomplishment in view, you would be incapable of doing one of these acts. So we'll explain that in a moment. That if you have accomplishment in view, you would be incapable of resorting to the belief that enlightenment comes about through superstitious and auspicious things. That's because by the time you get to accomplishment in view, which is the first stage of enlightenment, which is one part of that you would have already deeply penetrated into dependent origination. And you would understand the underlying problem that you're working to eliminate is ignorance. And that you know that in order to eliminate your ignorance, you need to cultivate wisdom. That's what's going to completely dismantle dependent origination. So you know that in order to get to enlightenment, you need to cultivate wisdom through learning, reflecting, and practicing. And there's no amount of rites, rituals, ceremony, worship, or prayer, these superstitious or auspicious acts, that's going to lead to the cultivation of wisdom. So by the time you've penetrated dependent origination and you've got to accomplishment in view, you would be incapable of resorting to the belief that enlightenment comes through rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, prayer, any kind of superstitious or auspicious acts, because you understand that your ultimate goal to get to enlightenment is to cultivate wisdom, and those things don't lead to wisdom. Then you would be incapable of seeking a person worthy of offerings outside of the community of the Buddha. That's what he means by outside of here. Because remember, during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were many other people that were teaching. There were different communities of ascetics and roaming homeless people who were trying to get to enlightenment. And they were all claiming that it was their teachings that led to enlightenment. But the Buddha knew that it was his teachings that led to enlightenment. And by the time you get to accomplishment in view and you fully penetrated into the teachings of the Buddha, you will know that they're the truth with 100% certainty. And in terms of making offerings to any particular community, the Buddha was teaching that you would be incapable of making an offering to those other practitioners because you understand that they're not practicing the wholesome way, that they're not practicing the true path to enlightenment, that it's his practitioners that are producing the results of cultivating wisdom and being able to share the true teachings that it takes to get to enlightenment. And if you've penetrated the teachings deeply enough, then you would be incapable of making offerings to a person in another community, that you would not see those teachings as beneficial and you wouldn't be actually interested in supporting those, that instead you would be interested in supporting the true teachings and the true way to get to enlightenment. So this is the first 6 that we're now going to be studying that are going to help you to be able to get to accomplishment in view, which is beyond just establishing right view. Do you guys have any questions on any of these? Okay, I don't see any questions. So now we'll go to the next one. Is there someone who would like to read these? Okay, it looks like Keely and then others as well. Okay, go ahead, Keely, and then we'll come to you, Leo, and it looks like Samantha was in there too.
Okay, thank you. 6 cases of incapability by one accomplished in will, second discourse. Monks, there are these 6 cases of incapability. What 6? One accomplished in will is 1. Incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness towards the teacher. 2. Incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness towards the teachings. 3. Incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness towards the community. 4. Incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness towards the training. 5. Incapable of resorting to anything that should not be relied upon. 6. Incapable of undergoing an 8th existence. These are the 6 cases of incapability. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So this is the next discourse that is giving you another layer of accomplishment in view. So this first one is that an individual who has accomplishment in view would be incapable of residing without deep respect towards the teacher, this politeness and respect. Because by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, which is what this is guiding you to be able to accomplish in addition to other things, you've seen deep transformation to the condition of your mind and your life. And you know that it's been this particular teacher that has helped you to be able to accomplish that. And you would be incapable of having anything but respect or politeness towards this person, because this person who's helped you get to the first stage of enlightenment, they have done so out of the kindness of their heart, out of loving kindness and compassion for you. They don't want anything from you. They don't expect anything from you. And now you would have nothing but respect and politeness towards that particular person, having gotten to this accomplishment in view, because you have this deep wisdom and you've seen this transformation in your mind and in your life. And the same thing is true about the teachings and the community itself, that you would have nothing but deep respect and politeness towards the teachings, because they've led to this complete improvement and transformation in your day-to-day life. And this community of people that you're part of, you've benefited from that community, that you've learned things from different people, not maybe overtly or directly, but maybe just observing people and the way that they interact in their day-to-day life in terms of the way they interact. And you have learned something from that and modeling some of that conduct. So you've benefited from having this teacher, the teachings, and being part of a certain community, and it's produced this beneficial result of transformation in your mind. You're not been enlightened yet, but you've seen enough transformation that you have nothing but politeness and respect for the teacher, the teachings, and the community. Then the training itself as well. The training being the Eightfold Path, the dependent origination, and all these other teachings, you would have nothing but deep respect and politeness for these things. Then, by getting to accomplishment in view, you would be incapable of resorting to anything that should not be relied upon. What this means is that you're incapable of making a decision that isn't based in truth. That you aren't going to make a decision unless you know the truth. And if that means delaying your decision until you collect up all the information to be able to then make a wise decision, that's what you would choose to do. Because by the time you get to accomplishment in view, you're going to understand the natural law of dhamma to a certain level of detail. And you understand any decisions that you make, it's going to produce a certain result, either wholesome or unwholesome. And if you make a decision that's not based in truth, that has assumptions or perceptions or false truths in there, then you're going to trip and stumble and you're going to make an unwise decision, and it's going to produce unwholesome results in your day-to-day life. So by the time you get to this accomplishment in view, you're going to be able to make sure you think through all the decisions you make, and you're only going to be able to make decisions when you fully have all the truth. So you'll be incapable of resorting to anything that should not be relied upon, because you're independently verifying any aspects of this decision that you're making, ensuring that you're making wise decisions. And then by the time you get to this accomplishment in view, your mind is in the first stage of enlightenment. So you would be incapable of having an eighth existence, because in that first stage of enlightenment, an individual will either continue on their way and actually get to enlightenment in that life, or when they're reborn, they're going to be reborn a maximum of 7 times in order to be able to then get to enlightenment. So an individual would be incapable of getting to an eighth existence by the time they get to this accomplishment in view. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Okay. Looks like Leo might have a question, or are you interested in reading the next one?
I also would like to ask a question, but it would be has nothing to do with the chapter here.
Yeah, based on our timing, if we can just keep with what we're studying today, and then if you have questions that doesn't pertain to what we're studying today, then maybe we can talk after class or another day.
Sure. All right. Okay, then I'll start with reading here.
Okay, perfect. So this is chapter 17.
6 cases of incapability by one accomplished in view. Monks, there are these 6 cases of incapability. What 6? One accomplished in view is: first, incapable of depriving his mother of life. Second, incapable of depriving his father of life. Third, incapable of depriving an arahant of life. Fourth, incapable of shedding the Tathagata blood with a mind of hatred. Fifth, incapable of creating a division in the community. Six, incapable of acknowledging another teacher. These are the 6 cases of incapability.
Okay, thank you, Leo. So getting to accomplishment in view is to have learned and practiced a certain amount of the teachings to get to that first stage of enlightenment. And by the time you get there, you will have understood the natural law of karma, of cause and effect. And you will know that getting into this human life is one of the very best things that could have happened for you to be able to now make your way to enlightenment. And remember, you've seen a tremendous improvement by the time you've gotten to that first stage of enlightenment. So by the time you get to accomplishment in view, you would be incapable of killing your parents, is what the Buddha is describing here, because you understand how important they were in order to be able to get you into this life, all the sacrifices that they made. Even if you disagreed with certain aspects of what your parents have done in your life, nonetheless, they've at least given you this life, and you would have appreciation for that, right? So by the time you get to this accomplishment in view, you've seen tremendous improvement, and you know you're headed to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time to keep learning and growing and developing. So you would be incapable of killing your parents because you have appreciation and gratitude for them for having given you this life. And also you understand the natural law of karma, that killing your parents would produce an enormous amount of unwholesome karma. And not just killing your parents, but killing any living being is going to produce a certain amount of unwholesome karma. So you would like to be able to make sure that you're practicing in this way, that you're understanding this, and that this is going to help you to be able to then get to that point where you can let go of any kind of expectations you have of your parents and just get to a point where you have appreciation and gratitude of your parents. And of course, I doubt any of you guys would be interested in killing your parents, but by the time someone's gotten to this accomplishment in view, they would be incapable of doing that. The same thing with an arahant, that you would be incapable of killing an enlightened being, because by the time you get to accomplishment in view, again, you've had a certain amount of progress to your mind in your life. You understand that an enlightened being is the individual who has wisdom that can help you on this journey and help others as well. You would understand how important that is for yourself and many other people in the world, and you would be incapable of killing a arahant. And the same thing is true about a Buddha or a Tathagata. You would understand how important that type of individual is to the world. It's very rare that a Buddha exists in the world, but if you lived during the same lifetime of a Buddha, you'd be incapable of shedding a Buddha's blood with a mind of hatred, because you understand how important that type of individual is in order to be able to share the teachings for others to be able to get to enlightenment. You'd also be incapable of creating division amongst the community, because it's this community that has helped an individual to be able to get to this first stage of enlightenment. And having seen that transformation to the mind, you'd be incapable of creating division, trying to split the community up, because you would know how beneficial this was for you, and you would like to see that community stay intact so that other people can benefit from that as well. And because you've seen so much improvement to the condition of your mind, you would be incapable of acknowledging another teacher, because you know that it was this teacher that helped you to get to that drastic improvement to your mind in your life, and that you know that it's only a matter of time before you get to enlightenment, and this teacher is going to be possible to be able to help you to be able to get to that enlightened mental state. So you would be incapable of acknowledging someone else because you've seen so much improvement to the condition of your mind in your life by this point. So here, that part of that one discourse where it says you would be incapable of performing a grave act that produces immediate results, that's these 5 things here. That you would be incapable of killing your mother, father, an arahant, an enlightened being, shedding the blood of a Tathagata with a mind of hatred, or creating division in the community. Some people refer to these as the 5 heinous crimes or the 5 heinous acts, because these are going to bring immediate results that is going to cause significant harm to countless people. So this is what that was referring to. So any questions on these 6? Let me know by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, it looks like Mayu Lee has a question in Facebook. She says, "Teacher, I sometimes go to church on special occasions when I get invited for my family. I know with 100% without a doubt that the Buddhist teachings is the ultimate truth, but I do give offerings to the church when I'm there to practice generosity. Is that okay? Or would it be wise for me to not give offerings? This comes to a choice for you to make. You need to be able to make this choice of what you think is best. I can't tell you one way or the other. I wouldn't restrain you from giving a gift or restrain you from practicing generosity, but you need to decide what's best in this situation based on the wisdom that you've cultivated and what you think would be wise. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. I don't see any questions anywhere else. So let's go to the last one here for this particular series. Would there be somebody who's interested in reading this? Okay, looks like Samantha and Keely. So I'll go ahead with you, Samantha. And then Keely, if you'd like to read the next one, we can have you read the next one.
6 cases of incapability by one accomplished in view, 4th discourse. Monks, there are these 6 cases of incapability. What 6? One accomplished in view is 1. Incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made by oneself. 2. Incapable of resorting to the view that pain and pleasure are made by another. 3. Incapable of resorting to the view that pain and pleasure are both made by oneself and made by another. 4. Incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are not made by oneself, but have arisen by accident or chance. 5. Incapable of resorting to the view that pain and pleasure are not made by another, but have arisen by accident or chance. 6. Incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made neither by oneself nor by another, but have arisen by accident or chance. These are the 6 cases of incapability. For what reason? Because the person accomplished in view has clearly seen causation and causally arisen objects. These are the 6 cases of incapability.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So here, this is another discourse with 6 more cases of incapability, because an individual would understand the Four Noble Truths and they would understand the natural law of Dhamma. That's what the Buddha is describing down here, that in order to get to this accomplishment in view, an individual would have clearly seen causation and causally arisen objects. Seeing causation is to be able to see the natural law of Dhamma, that you understand cause and effect or action and result. Understanding and seeing causally arisen objects is to understand dependent origination. So in order to get to accomplishment in view, you would have been able to see those 2 things clearly. You haven't fully necessarily understood them 100% because your mind's not fully awake and completely awake, but you at least have seen them and you understand that this is true. And now you're practicing to continue to develop that. So having seen causation and seen causally arisen objects, meaning you see the natural law of karma and you see dependent origination, that you would be incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made by one's self. Because you understand that there is no self. You understand what's causing pleasure and pain is craving, desire, attachment. You've already seen that through the Four Noble Truths. So you would be incapable of being able to resort to that view that one's self is causing this, because there is no self. And you'd be incapable of resorting to the view that these pleasure and painful feelings are made by another person. This is typically what we have in the unenlightened state. And when we have lack of wisdom, we think other people are causing us to be angry or frustrated. But by the time you have establishment in right view, and then you get accomplishment in view, you'd be incapable of seeing it that way, because you've deeply penetrated and you've been able to see the truth that it's your own mind that's causing this. And then you'd be incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are both made by oneself or made by another, right? Because you understand that that's not true. You understand that this pleasure and pain are not made by oneself, but have arisen by accident or chance, because you know it's craving, desire, attachment that's causing that. You would be incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are not made by another, but have arisen by accident or chance. And you'd be incapable of resorting to the view that this pleasure and pain are made neither by oneself nor by another, but have arisen by accident or chance. Because you understand what's causing this, is you understand it's the craving, desire, attachment that is causing these conditioned pleasant feelings and painful feelings. So this is part of accomplishment in view along with all those others. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, you're welcome, Ayuli. Pleased to help you. All right. So I don't see any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next chapter. And I think Keely was interested in reading. So if you'd like to go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. 6 benefits in realizing the fruit of stream entry. Monks, these are the 6 benefits in realizing the fruit of stream entry. What 6? 1. One is fixed in the wholesome teachings. 2. One is incapable of decline. 3. One's discontentedness is limited. 4. One comes to possess wisdom not shared by others. 5. One has clearly seen causation. 6. One has clearly seen causally arisen objects. These are the 6 benefits in realizing the fruit of stream entry. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So here the Buddha is talking about these 6 benefits of getting to the first stage of enlightenment. So here, the first one is that one is fixed in the wholesome teachings, meaning that you know that it's these teachings that are leading to the improvement of your mind and your life. You're fixed. You know that, hey, I just need to keep studying this collection of teachings and it's going to move this mind to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. So you will know that it's these teachings that are leading to that improvement. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind is incapable of decline or regression. That peacefulness that you have at the level of the first stage of enlightenment, where there's still discontentedness there, but you have a certain degree of peacefulness. You have a certain degree of focus and concentration and clarity and deep memory. You have a certain amount of benefits that you're experiencing there. Your mind's incapable of declining backwards or regressing out of that stage of enlightenment. Also, when you get to that first stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness is limited, that you don't have the real high highs and the real low lows anymore. Your mind has come more towards the middle, where you're still experiencing discontentedness in the first stage of enlightenment, but it's limited. It's become more narrow that you're experiencing this, and it's less and less frequently that you're experiencing discontentedness. You also have certain wisdom that other people don't have, because you've cultivated wisdom about the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Natural Law of Dhamma, dependent origination, so many other teachings. And other people don't have this wisdom. And this is where you really need to keep the ego in check, because the conceit can arise here, that you realize that this problem that someone is struggling with and having so many difficulties, you see it as so simple and so easy, that it's just impermanence. That's all it is. But they can't see that. And this is where you need to be able to maintain your humbleness, because your mind's going to have wisdom that other people don't have. And they're going to be really struggling with something very minimal that you find to be so easy. So you're going to need to be able to keep your ego in check and make sure that your conceit isn't arising, understanding that yes, you do have wisdom that others don't have, and you need to arise this loving kindness, this genuine interest in seeing them be well, and arise this compassion, which is concern for their misfortune. Then by the time you've gotten to this first stage of enlightenment, you will have clearly seen causation, meaning you've clearly seen the natural law of karma. You're not fully awake to it at this point, but you've clearly seen it and you know that it's true. And the same thing about dependent origination, that you've clearly seen causally arisen objects, that you've penetrated it and you know that it's true and you've cultivated the wisdom about it, but you haven't completely dismantled it yet, but you know that it's true. So these are the 6 benefits of having gotten to this first stage of enlightenment that the Buddha is sharing. Essentially, one of the ways you can think about this first stage of enlightenment is that you've collected up all the things that you need in order to be able to get to enlightenment itself. You're still going to need guidance. You're still going to need help from a teacher, and you still need to be part of a community. But you would have gathered up all the things that you need in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment. The way I think about it is like base camp in Mount Everest. You don't just stumble into the base camp of Mount Everest. At the base camp of Mount Everest, you have the ability to get to the summit. You haven't done it yet, but you have the ability to get there. You have all the equipment, you have all the resources, you have the wisdom to be able to do it. You just haven't actually done it yet. So the first stage of enlightenment is very similar, that you're not going to just stumble your way into the first stage of enlightenment. There's going to be real concerted effort to learn, grow, develop, to study the teachings and make your way to that first stage of enlightenment. And now that you've collected up all of that wisdom, you have the ability to get to enlightenment, but you haven't yet done it. So that's one of the ways you can think about the 6 benefits here that the Buddha is teaching you. Do you guys have any questions here on this chapter? You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I don't see any questions. So now we'll just go to the last chapter for today. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Samantha. So I'm probably going to guide you in this because this is actually quite a long chapter here. There's quite a bit of different things. I'm going to kind of pause you at a certain point as we go in the chapter, Samantha.
Okay. 3 wrong views about sectarian tenets that a noble disciple must abandon. Monks, there are these 3 sectarian tenets which, when questioned, interrogated, and cross-examined by the wise, and taken to their conclusion, will eventuate in non-action. What are the 3? 1. There are monks, some ascetics and Brahmins, who hold such a doctrine and view as this. Whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by what was done in the past. 2. There are other ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view as this. Whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by God's creative activity. 3. And there are still other ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view as this. Whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that occurs without a cause or condition.
Okay, we'll kind of pause right there for a moment. So the Buddha is setting up this longer discourse here. And this is a way that the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago, and people understand today that this is a very wise way to teach, that people actually teach you this, that you share with people what you're going to teach them. You then teach them, and then you teach them what you taught them, right? So there's these 3 sections. So this first section, he's just setting up for you what he's about to teach you. And what he's saying is that there's 3 aspects of life that if you have these thoughts, if you have these particular views and opinions, that it's going to lead to non-action, meaning that you aren't going to take the actions that you need in order to move your mind to enlightenment. Because remember, what the Buddha is teaching you is to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state where you no longer experience any discontent feelings. But if you have one of these 3 things that he's talking about, if you have this view and opinion, then you're not going to make your way to doing the improvements that you need in order to train the mind to get to enlightenment. The first one is that if you think in your mind, if you have the opinion or view that the discontent feelings, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, is caused by what you've done in the past, meaning in previous lives, or what you've done when you were a child, if you think that the pleasure, the pain, the neither pain nor pleasure is caused by things you've done in the past, then it's like, I can't change the past, so why should I do anything to be able to get to enlightenment now? So it's going to lead to non-action because the mind is having this false view, this lack of wisdom, thinking that somehow the experiences that you're having with discontentedness now is coming from the past. And since you can't change the past, there's no reason to do anything at all. That's going to lead to non-action. If an individual has the thought that the pleasure, pain, and neither pain nor pleasure is being caused by God, by God's creative actions, then if it's God that's causing these feelings, you can't change God. So, why should I do anything on the path to enlightenment? Because I'm not going to be able to get rid of that discontentedness anyway because it's God that's causing it. So that's going to lead to non-action as well. Or if the mind thinks that the reason why these discontent feelings are occurring is because there is no cause and condition, they're just happening randomly or by accident, well, since there's no cause, then I can't actually eliminate them. So why even take any action to eliminate them? So any of these 3 opinions or views are going to lead to non-action, where you're not going to do the work that you need in order to apply effort and energy towards improving the condition of your mind in your life. So the Buddha is just setting that up for you. And now he's going to go into the detail, helping you to be able to understand this. So I'll turn it back over to you, Samantha.
Okay. A view that whether pleasure or pain are caused by past deeds. Monks, I approached those ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view as this. Whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by past deeds. And I said to them, is it true that you, O venerable ones, hold such a doctrine and view? When I ask them this, they affirm it. Then I say to them, in such a case, it is due to past deeds that you might destroy life, take what is not given, indulge in sexual activity, speak falsehood, produce argumentative speech, speak harshly, indulge in idle chatter, that you might be full of longing, have a mind of ill will, and hold wrong view. Those who fall back on past deeds as the essential truth have no interest to do what should be done and to avoid doing what should not be done, nor do they make an effort in this respect. Since they do not apprehend as true and valid anything that should be done or should not be done, they are muddle-minded, they do not guard the mind, and even the personal designation ascetic could not be legitimately applied to them. This was my first legitimate confirming falsehoods of those ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view. A view that whether pain or pleasure are caused by God's creative activity. Then, monks, I approached those ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view as this. Whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by God's creative activity. And I said to them, is it true that you venerable ones hold such a doctrine and view? And when I ask them this, they affirm it. Then I say to them, in such a case, it is due to God's creative activity that you might destroy life, take what is not given, indulge in sexual activity, speak falsehood, produce argumentative speech, speak harshly, indulge in idle chatter, that you might be full of longing, have a mind of ill will, and hold wrong view. Those who fall back on God's creative activity as the essential truth have no interest to do what should be done and to avoid doing what should not be done, nor do they make an effort in this respect. Since they do not apprehend as true and valid anything that should be done or should not be done, they are muddle-minded, they do not guard the mind, and even the personal designation ascetic could not be legitimately applied to them. This was my second legitimate confirming falsehoods of those ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view. A view that whether pain or pleasure all occur without a cause or condition. Then, monks, I approach those ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view as this. Whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that occurs without a cause or condition. And I said to them, is it true that you venerable ones hold such a doctrine and view? Then I ask them this, they affirm it. Then I say to them, in such a case, it is without a cause or condition that you might destroy life, take what is not given, indulge in sexual activity, speak falsehood, produce argumentative speech, speak harshly, indulge in idle chatter, that you might be full of longing, have a mind of ill will, and hold wrong view. Those who fall back on absence of cause and condition as the essential truth have no interest to do what should be done and to avoid doing what should not be done, nor do they make an effort in this respect. Since they do not apprehend as true and valid anything that should be done or should not be done, they are muddle-minded, they do not guard the mind, and even the personal designation ascetic could not be legitimately applied to them. This was my third legitimate confirming falsehoods of those ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So each one of these discourses is structured very similarly, so I can just use one of them to explain all three of them. So what the Buddha is saying here is that he went to these individuals, and these individuals oftentimes were all eating together. So in this conversation, he might have said, hey, is it true that you hold this doctrine in view, that it's because of things in the past that causes your discontentedness, or it's because of God that you experience discontentedness, or there is no cause and condition that produces this discontentedness? And when we approach these different groups of people that thought this way, they affirm it. They said, yeah, that's exactly right. That's what we think, is that it's everything from the past that's causing these feelings, or that it's God that's causing these feelings, or there is no cause and condition that is producing these feelings. And then he says to them, well, then is it such a case that those things are what's either causing or not causing the destruction of life, the taking of what's not given, the sexual activity, the falsehoods, the argumentative speech, the harsh speech, the idle chatter? Is it because of these things that things that you've done in the past is what's causing these, or if it's because of God that these things are happening, or there is no causing condition that is producing these, right? Because of course there is causes and conditions that are producing those. And what's producing it is craving, anger, and ignorance. And that's what the Buddha is talking about here is it that you might be full of longing or ill will or hold wrong view? Is it because of things in the past that you have craving, ill will, and ignorance? Or is it because of this God that is the reason why you have craving, anger, and ignorance? Or is it because there is no causing condition? So an individual who thinks this way hasn't actually penetrated into the Four Noble Truths, into dependent origination. They don't understand the natural law of karma. So the Buddha understands that, and he's asking them this question so that maybe perhaps on their side they could arise some wisdom here. And what the Buddha understands is he understands that because an individual is falling back on this inaccuracy, this falsehood, that they're then not going to put forth the effort to be able to train their mind to get to enlightenment. That's why he says that those who have this as an essential truth, that it's because of things in the past, it's because of God, or there is no cause and condition that is leading to any of these things, that they have no interest to do what should be done or to avoid doing what should not be done. And they don't make any effort to actually accomplish development on the path to enlightenment. And because of that, the Buddha is saying that their mind is muddled, meaning that they're lacking concentration. Because an individual who thinks this way, their mind's going to still have these pollutions, and they're going to lack concentration and focus. They're also not going to be guarding their mind with mindfulness and awareness of mind. And then ultimately, the Buddha says the personal designation of aesthetic could not be legitimately applied to them, meaning you're not even on the path to enlightenment, because being an aesthetic means that you've given up your worldly life, you've entered into this life of homelessness, and now you're on this path to enlightenment. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, that was a common way that people would make their way to enlightenment. But you don't have to be an aesthetic in order to get to enlightenment. You can do that from a household life too. But the Buddha is saying that you're not even on the path to enlightenment if you think that these pleasant, painful, and neither painful nor pleasant feelings are caused from things in the past, or it's caused from God, or there is no cause and condition, because in this case you haven't even learned the very first teaching, which is the Four Noble Truths. That's the very first teaching that you would need to be able to learn to be able to get on the path to enlightenment. So the Buddha is saying that he's confirmed these falsehoods, that people have these doctrine and views, and this is going to lead to non-action, meaning that someone is not going to take the actions that they need in order to produce more and more improvement to the condition of their mind in their life, because they're not seeing even the very first teaching of the Four Noble Truths. So the Buddha is helping you to be able to see how these things aren't true, and that it's the Four Noble Truths that is helping you to see what's causing the pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant feelings. So let me know if you guys have questions here on this discourse. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do here is just end class by thanking all of you guys. Thank you for reading. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn and grow and develop on the path to enlightenment. Next week, we're going to be in the next 10 chapters. So if you guys would like to read those before class or after class, it's going to be chapters 21 through 30 in volume 12. That's what we're going to be studying next week. Tomorrow in the group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 14 of Developing a Life Practice, the path that leads to enlightenment. This is where you learn about the 4 healthy mental states of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These are going to antidote specific symptoms that are in the mind. So this is where the Buddha oftentimes gets the reputation of being like a doctor, because there's certain symptoms and then there's a certain prescription that you apply. And you are your own best doctor. So if you understand these teachings of the 4 healthy mental states, you can actually see those symptoms in your mind, and then you can apply the prescription and be able to transform your mind. So that's what I'm going to be teaching tomorrow in the group learning program. And then of course we have our Sunday night meditation, and next week I'm teaching a Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment course and all these other things. So again, thank you guys for your dedication to learning and growing and developing, and perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Be well and take care. Sawadee-khap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.